When you've been on your fertility journey for months or even years at this stage, it can feel like an endless spiral of frustration, disappointment, and heartbreak. Every month that goes by is the loss of so much, and having to constantly pick yourself up again and again and keep going is exhausting. And as we well know, it completely takes over every single part of your life. So how do you keep going? How do you know it won't all be for nothing? How do you stop doubting yourself and trust that you're on the right path? On today's episode, it is my goal for you to walk away knowing that you already are. Welcome to your journey to fertility. This is the podcast that blends science with spirit to give you all the tools you need as you navigate your fertility journey. I'm your host, Jennifer Edmonds, and for the last 15 years, I've been helping women on their journeys to motherhood and beyond. I believe that combining the latest scientific research along with the best energetic and mindset practices will help you to avoid putting your life on hold and bring you closer to your baby. Each week, you'll learn ways to support your fertility and trust your body so that you can stop stressing that you'll never have your baby and finally walk your path to motherhood. This is the Your Journey to Fertility podcast. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing your time and your energy with me today. I absolutely love having you with me. Now, today's episode was inspired by a conversation that I had with one of my students a couple of weeks ago. She is struggling to have a baby and going through IVF. And she told me that she feels like for the last few months, she's just been like, go, go, go. It's been one thing after the next. She's been so busy at work. She's been rushing to appointments and preparing for treatments. And it got to the point where she finally had some time to stop and to rest and to start working on some of the regulating tools and the practices that we had been working on together. And she said to me, Jen, I feel awful. I'm actually at this point where I feel worse. And I think that this is a really important thing to mention because we have this huge misconception that healing is always going to feel good. We expect that when we get those times to start really working on some calm, working on some nervous system regulation, that we are going to feel good. And this student of mine, she was like, I feel awful. Is this normal? I'm crying over everything. I feel like a wreck. I have no energy. I can't get out of bed. And in reality, when you finally give your nervous system some space to exhale, when you have been in fight or flight mode for weeks, months, however long it might have been, slowing down can feel really heavy, really overwhelming, exhausting, emotional. You might feel like crying all the time. I did an episode about how to know you are in fertility burnout a few weeks ago. And if you feel like that is something that you can relate to, I absolutely recommend you go back and listen to that episode because that explained in a lot of detail how we get to that stage of, being on edge and being so anxious and go, 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 and tipping over into that point of absolute apathy and I can't even be bothered anymore. And I think that that is something that happens to a lot of us. And we really expect, okay, well, I'm working on myself. I'm taking time to go to bed a little bit earlier. I'm not staying up late working. I'm not putting a million things onto my calendar this week because I know I need time for myself. We assume that it's going to feel really good. But unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. Compare this to when I'm sure you have had this experience or you know someone who has. When you are preparing for a trip or a holiday and you are knowing you're going to have a couple of weeks off work where you won't be able to answer your emails. So you are working so hard to prepare for this time off that you are cramming everything in to make sure that every last little box is checked before you go on leave so that you don't have to do anything once you're away. And you do all of that. And then as soon as you stop, you get sick. I'm sure we've all had that happen to us in some way or another. And that is a classic example of you living on fumes, basically. You are just living on adrenaline. You are pushing and overriding your nervous system and you finally get that chance to rest. and your body is like, oh, finally I can let everything out. And that is so often where we end up feeling really unwell. When you have spent so long in survival mode, it can actually feel really scary for your brain to stop and to slow down. Everything that you've been able to avoid or ignore when you've been pushing and racing through things, it all comes to the forefront, and that can feel incredibly overwhelming for your nervous system. As I like to point out, because it cannot be said enough, your brain doesn't understand the difference between a threat that is life-threatening and a threat that is, my inbox is full, or I'm terrified my next embryo transfer isn't going to work. None of these things are life-threatening, but your brain doesn't actually know that. It only knows that it is scary and threatening. So if you have been struggling with this, if you are racked with self-doubt and you're finding that on this journey, you just don't think you are getting anywhere, you don't feel like you're making any progress, today I want you to know that first of all, you are not alone. This is incredibly normal, and it is part of something that you want so much. And because it is such a big deal, it's going to have such a big impact on your life. Doubt is a human response to uncertainty. So it's not a sign of failure. It's not a sign that you've done anything wrong, or that you're on the wrong path, or that you're not getting there quick enough or in the right way. It is none of those things. We are hardwired to always look for the worst case scenario, for the negatives. We're always looking for that, is this going to be something that doesn't work out? I need to be prepared. I need to come up with all of the worst case scenarios just in case so I can prepare myself. It is a survival instinct. So it's not something that you're doing wrong. When you feel like you are doing everything, you are eating right, you have got the best supplements sorted, you're exercising, but things still aren't working, it's almost impossible not to doubt yourself or blame yourself and think, well, what did I do wrong? How can I do all of this and still get nothing? It doesn't make any sense. But it doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. And today I am going to show you why. Trusting the process is one of the hardest things that I think humans can do. And it's a bit of a saying, when, if you look at it in a non-fertility sense, perhaps you're starting a new course or you're working with a coach or a therapist, whatever it might be. And, the way that they start the process isn't what you expect or not what you think is going to give you the desired outcome. But they always say to you, trust the process. And it's hard for your brain to do that because you want the answers. Our brains love things that are predictable. We want to know what the outcomes are going to be. But trusting the process is something that we need to learn to do. There are a few parts to this, and we are going to go through, before we actually get into that, we need to think about the actual ways that you can start trusting that you are on the right path. The first thing I want to mention here is this metaphor of the garden. So if you are thinking about some seeds that you want to plant, you're designing a few things that you want to put around your garden, around your home. You wouldn't plant those seeds today and expect apples tomorrow. You wouldn't get upset about that. You'd be like, okay, well, no, the process is we plant the seed, we get some sunlight, we water the seeds. I'm not a great gardener. I'm sure there's more to it than that. But we know it takes time. But we know that is the process and that you will get a result. But we don't know when, and we don't exactly know how. Growth is always happening beneath the soil, even when you can't see it. When I think about my fertility journey, and I have so many examples of month after month where everything was perfect. Like literally I had done everything right. Not a single piece of cheese or chocolate had passed my lips. I had taken all my supplements. I'd gone to bed at 9:30 every night and everything was perfect. I had ovulated right in the middle of my cycle. Everything should have worked. The month that I got pregnant with my son was a disaster. So without going into too many details, it was one of those months where nothing went right. My husband and I just weren't getting along great. We'd pick fights with each other over stupid things. It was absolutely not the most romantic month in the world without going into detail. There was a lot of arguments, a lot of things that weren't working. I ended up ovulating on day 9 that month. So I had completely written it off. I thought, well, this is not the month that things are going to work out. How can I have all of this stress going on with, having arguments with my husband, and I didn't even ovulate on the right day. So it's not even going to be a worthwhile month to worry about. But that was the month that it happened. And it just goes to show you that things don't have to be perfect in the moment. It is everything that you do leading up to it that makes such a big difference. Because all of those months where things were perfect, I was like, I can feel that my baby is so close. How can this not work? How could I have gotten it so wrong? I felt like that you can't possibly be going through this idea of, connecting with your spirit baby and feeling all of the signs that they're on the way and then getting it wrong. But what I like to remind myself time and time again of is that I didn't get it wrong. I got the timing wrong. And that is one of the hardest things for us to get our heads around, because we can know what we want. We can be really clear with the universe, but we don't know when and we don't know how these are going to come to us. So progress in this space of your fertility journey and in life, it is not always visible in the moment. You just need to know that by doing the healing work, making the time for yourself, giving yourself what you need, it is going to work when it works, but it is not always going to feel good. And we always think that when it does feel good, this is when it's going to happen. But I want you to know that that isn't always the way it works. And I know that it's only really in hindsight that we can look back and say, oh yeah, that's the way things worked out because of this. And I feel like I needed to experience that because now I've got this now. And, hopefully in hindsight, you can get to a point where your journey makes a little bit more sense. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. But I certainly can. And I can now look back at those difficult times and say, well, they led me to something so much better. So it is my hope for you, after listening to this episode today, that someday and somehow you'll be able to look back and know that this whole journey made sense for you. So let's get into, how do you actually stop doubting yourself on this journey and trust that you are on the right path? There are 4 things that I want to speak about in a little bit more detail. The first thing is you need to embrace that doubt is a part of your journey and a part of being human. We cannot control everything. It also would be very boring if we could. Imagine if every time you went to watch a movie, you knew exactly what was going to happen. Like, you wouldn't even bother. Life would just be so dull. And I know sometimes you just want to say, look, if someone could just tell me I'm going to be pregnant in 12 months, I wouldn't even care about everything else that happened in the meantime. I get it. I so get it. But sadly, we do not have a crystal ball, and that is not the way that things work. Your doubts, your fears, your worries, all of these things are just your nervous system's way of trying to keep you safe. So we need to be okay with that. Maybe not even okay with it. We need to acknowledge it and just accept that that is there. You are going to doubt yourself. You're going to doubt your decisions. You're going to make mistakes. And when doubts come up, you're not allowed to continually beat yourself up about them. That is very, very important to know. It is normal that we are going to make mistakes and we learn from them, but it is what you do next that matters. I think that this part is really, really important. So if you are driving, maybe come back to this, but this might be something you want to journal about, or just take a couple of notes that if you think about the things that are the biggest doubts in your life, write them all down. I always speak so much about the benefit of getting all of your doubts, your fears, your worries out of your head and down onto a page. They become less dramatic. They have a lot less hold over you once you get them out of your head. And that leads us to the second thing that we need to do here, which is really question them. Call out that voice that says, this isn't going to work. You're just going to go through all of this again and it's going to be for nothing. We don't want to beat ourselves up about these things that could go wrong. Instead, we want to get curious. I often get asked by people, how do I know the difference between listening to my intuition or knowing that that is just fear trying to run the show? I have lots of practices to help you get into a really regulated state so you can feel more capable and really trust that it is your intuition talking. And we've spoken about many of those on the podcast before. I have a bunch of links in the show notes if you want to go and check out a lot of my resources for helping you find your own regulating tools. But basically, in fear, you are making decisions really, really quickly and then changing your mind. You're obsessing over them, questioning whether you made the right decisions, questioning yourself. Your intuition is the complete opposite to this. It's quiet, it's really assured, and it feels good in your body, and you don't question it. You don't question whether it's the right decision. You just know that that is the next step to take. So when you've got a very big decision to make and you feel like your doubts are getting in the way or they're trying to run the show, they're clouding your judgment, I want you to get quiet and let your intuition guide you. When I was going through my second fertility journey, I was given this practice of really getting curious about the mind chatter that I was telling myself and noticing it in the moment. So whenever thoughts that came up, these things I would tell myself over and over again, well, when the clinic calls, they're just going to tell me it's a negative and this next cycle isn't going to work. And really starting to change that narrative that I was telling myself over and over again. And it made an enormous difference. I want to tell you a story that is not really related to fertility, but gives you another example of how this works. So about a year ago, my husband and I decided to buy a house. And it was something that we had been planning to do for years and years. But if you are not from Sydney and are not familiar with how hard it is to buy a house in Sydney, I think it comes at number 2 in the world in terms of the most unaffordable place in the world. Anyway, for people, who are in our 40s have been working for decades, what we could afford and what we wanted was very, very different. So we really had to get our meter of what was possible down to a certain level. Anyway, we were told by many real estate agents, it's going to take you 6 to 12 months. This area is not going to be one that you can afford. It's going to be a really difficult process. I decided not to accept that, and within reason, but I decided just to really keep my possibilities open that we would actually get what we wanted. And there were a lot of odd parallels between buying a house and going through my fertility journey. I was, always waiting for my phone to ring. I was constantly checking online anything new that was listed. Like I was up at 2 a.m. like scrolling, and there were a lot of similarities that came up. But I got really present to the things I was telling myself. It was so depressing. I mean, we would go to some of these awful, awful places and you think you wouldn't want your worst enemy to live in this house. Yep, they're wanting an obscene amount of money for this, and this is outrageous that we should even be considering it. So it gets you into a pretty bad place. We're like, this is never going to happen. Why are we bothering? This is just not on the cards for us. I got really present to that. And every time I noticed those thoughts coming up, I decided to reframe them. So it would be, instead of this is never going to happen, like the right house for us is just waiting for us to go and see it. It hasn't been listed yet. I have faith in our journey that things are going to work out at the right time. And it did. We looked for less than 3 months. We found a beautiful little place. It was not in the area that was the suburb of my dreams. It wasn't, the dream house but it was a beautiful little place. It was perfect for our family. It was on budget, and it was not something that took a long time. And I honestly think that the way that we talk to ourselves really shapes the journey that we're on. A few weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago now, I did an episode around ways that you can reframe your mindset and different ways to start talking to yourself. So if you missed that episode, scroll back a couple of months and have a look for that, because I think that is something that you would really, really find helpful. But things that you can start to say to yourself, if you notice that your brain is constantly telling you, I'm broken, my body can't do this, start to catch yourself in the moment and say, I'm doing the best I can. My body is recalibrating. I just need a little bit more support. I need a little bit more time. Things like, it's never going to happen. I don't know why I'm bothering. This is just not going to work out for us. Catch those thoughts and reframe them and say to yourself in the moment, I'm still on my journey. Jen, you are doing everything with all the information that you have. Really frame it in that first person. Talk to yourself gently, like you would a really, really dear friend. So I encourage you to start noticing your self-talk every single day and start to soften it. And it might sound really silly, but you can do all of this in your head, so no one's going to know. But when you notice that those dark thoughts are coming up, stop them and say, these are just thoughts. They are not my reality. I can't predict the future with 100% certainty. So what am I going to say to myself in the moment with kindness and compassion, like I would a very dear friend? Now, taking this a little bit deeper, the fourth thing that I mentioned before, I want you to now really write out all of those doubts. So whatever it might be, I'll never be a parent. This cycle isn't going to work. I'm going to miscarry again. Get all of your fears out, put them onto the page. Now, once you've done that, for each one of them, this is what we're going to do. You're going to place a hand on your heart. You're going to close your eyes, tune inwards, and I want you to say to yourself out loud, I let go of the story that I'm never going to be a parent. Or I let go of the story that I'm going to miscarry again. And I want you to do this for every single doubt that you write down. And I want you to say this and repeat it to yourself enough times until you feel that click, until you feel that absolute release that it has left your body. And it might not happen immediately. It might not even happen the time that you set to do it. It might happen the next time or the one after that. But say it until you can let it go from your body. This is a really powerful practice, but it is one that we are resistant to doing because it makes us address all of our deepest, darkest fears and doubts and worries, and they are not things that we want to look at. Now, just a word of caution, whenever you are using affirmations or mantras or using language, it is very important that they come from a place of regulation. So we come back to our regulating toolkit. We get ourselves into a place where we feel physically calm and safe. We know that our nervous systems are in a receptive position to then start changing some of these thoughts and beliefs. So I want you to go through all of those. And that is not something that you're going to do today. Maybe do one a day, maybe do two, come back to it when you can. But these are things you're going to keep coming back to and working on. And when new ones come up, you're going to need to add them to the list as well. Now, just as a bonus, I want to add one here actually that has just come to mind. Surround yourself with people who support you in this. So truly, find the doctor that really wants this and believes that this can happen for you, not the one that's always telling you your egg quality is terrible, or, the friends that are saying, oh, it'll just happen when you stop thinking about it, or, you become a little bit more positive, all of the things that we hear. Surround yourself with those people who they hype you up. They're like, you can do this. I know you can do this. I don't know how it's going to happen or when, but I have absolute faith in you. Surround yourself with stories of women who have gotten through their journeys and had the families of their dreams against all of the odds. There are so many amazing women that I've had on this podcast that have had their children after the most doubtful journeys where they never thought it would happen. Give your brain as many reminders as possible that this can happen for you as well. So I want to recap the main points that we've spoken about today. The first was that doubt is normal. Doubts are not a sign that you're failing or that you're on the wrong path. They are just a usual part of being a human. The second is to trust all of that unseen growth. So come back to that analogy of growing the apple tree from the seed. Things are happening even if you can't see them. The third is to really watch your language and choose thoughts and leave that space for possibility. And the fourth was to lean on tools that bring you back to that place of self-trust and knowing that you can do it and surrounding yourself with people that know you can do it. So in closing, as always, I want to remind you that you are already doing the hardest work here just by showing up, by listening to podcasts like this, for caring for yourself, for taking time to think about what you need and putting yourself first. You are already further ahead than you realize. And even if it doesn't always feel good, trust the process. Now, if you want to learn a little bit more about all of the resources I talk about so much on this podcast, don't forget I have a free fertility yoga guide available that you can download. The link is in the show notes. This gives you practices to work through each phase of your cycle, at times where you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, and just to give you a few more little things to throw into your toolkit. And then if you want to take this practice deeper and really get in tune with your body, in tune with your nervous system, connect with your spirit baby, your higher power, the universe, then go and jump into my fertility yoga course, because this is the place where we do the very, very deep work. And the links to those are in the show notes as well. If you found this episode helpful, I would love it if you could share it with someone and leave me a quick written review, because that is the absolute best way for us to get this word out there to as many people as possible. Now, next week on the podcast, I have had so many requests about this, but we are doing a whole episode on manifestation and what some of my exact manifesting tools were and what worked when I was trying to conceive. It's a really fun woo-woo episode that is also based in a lot of research and science. So I cannot wait to have you back next week for that episode. But until then, I am sending you all of my wishes as you continue your own journey to fertility.